Good morning. It is good to see all of you. Back in my oil and gas days, one of the places that I traveled most often was Nigeria. You look at my old passport and you'll see every year I've got a one-year multi-entry business visa for Nigeria. I went there often, sometimes for just one meeting. I was in transit longer than I was in country, but most of the time for a number of days, maybe a week or so, but multiple times every year. The thing I enjoyed about my trips to Nigeria were the Nigerian Christians, especially the ones that I interacted with in the marketplace. These were the boldest, the most outspoken Christians in the workplace I have ever encountered anywhere in the world. I'm like, nobody ever told them you're not supposed to bring Jesus to work with you. They did. And one of the things I loved is that occasionally one of them would get transferred, like a Nigerian engineer, would get transferred to the US. And they would bring that boldness with them. And they pretended like they didn't know you're not supposed to do that, and they did it anyway. And I had a particular friend named Bob. I would watch him in wonder and admiration as he just talked about Jesus boldly down at one of the Chevron buildings in downtown Houston. Just wonderful stuff. But as exciting as their boldness is, the truth is, Nigeria can be a really hard place. And in parts of Nigeria, it can be a really, really hard place, especially to be a Christian. I don't know if you realize this, but since 2009, over 50,000 Christians have been martyred in Nigeria alone. Over 20,000 churches and Christian schools have been destroyed, most of them burned to the ground. It's a hard place to be a Christian. And so their boldness is just that much more admirable because it's in the face of opposition. Nigeria is one of the toughest places in the world to be outspoken about your faith, but they're outspoken anyway. Yet it's not the only place. In more and more places around the world, to take a stand for Christ in the public square, whether it's the marketplace or academia or anywhere, is considered increasingly not just unacceptable or controversial, but in many places, punishable. So here's the question today. What do we do as the people of God when evil gets the upper hand? During those times in history, or those times in our lives where being the person you know God calls you to be gets really hard, where standing on truth and for truth is suddenly unacceptable to the people around you. Or even times at a more personal level where you're just facing hardship and it feels like just the evil has overtaken your life, whether it's a financial challenge or a family challenge or a personal health challenge. When it seems like evil is getting the upper hand, what do we do? That's what we're going to look at today. That's the question we're going to be answering this morning. And we're doing it in Daniel chapter 11. It's 536 BC, and when this was written. And Israel was just 100 years away from 400 years of silence from God. Now, for the next 100 years, there would be minor prophets. But by the time Malachi got done, about 100 years after this was written, it would be 400 years of silence from heaven before God would speak again. And when he did, finally, it would be through John the Baptist. Now, what made the situation even more difficult is that those were going to be some extraordinarily difficult years for the people of God. Times of real hardship. And what we saw last week, and just by way of introduction of this great vision of Daniel, is that it includes suffering, it would include war, and it would include persecution. By the way, just in the text of Daniel, chapters 10, 11, and 12 are really all one thing. And it's just so huge and so detailed that it would be impossible for us today to do any real justice to the detail of Daniel 11. But what I want us to see today is enough to understand how God shows up for us during those times when it seems like evil gets the upper hand. But more than that, not just how he shows up for us, the assurance of his presence that he provides, but what kind of people we're supposed to be at times like that. Because there's some wonderful examples in this chapter of just that. So the Jews are 100 years away from 400 years of silence from God. And those would not be years where of the throne of David once again being occupied and a renewed ascendancy of the kingdom of Israel. No, that would be years of subjection to and even subjugation to foreign empires. And for most of that period, at least the next 100 years, they would be this little group of sheep and surrounded by empires of wolves. And for the first 100 years, they would enjoy the protection of the Persian Empire. But after that, the protection was gone. And so let's look at this, because since Israel, and this is such an important point, since Israel wouldn't be hearing from God for 400 years, God graciously decides to give them a preview right now. And that's what Daniel 11 is. It's God saying, here's what's going to happen during those 400 years of silence. And the detail is absolutely incredible. And we're going to talk about what it must have been like for Israel to watch events unfold around them that were predicted right here by the prophet Daniel right in front of them. So our title today comes from this passage, and it's simply this: the people who know their God. Because there's going to come a time in the passage as it unfolds where the people who know their God stand up, stand firm, stand strong, and they take action. And that's really the section that will be the call to action for us. Now, as I've said a moment ago, it would take hours to go through every one of the prophecies that are contained in chapter 11. In just verses 2 through 35, scholars have counted up as many as 135 prophecies. And what you see as history unfolded is that every one of them was fulfilled with great specificity. And we could, if we had time, actually go through them. And you read the prophecy, oh, that was fulfilled here by that person on that day. And that battle was this battle known to history. And this person is exactly as they were described. And this is what happened to them, exactly as predicted, and straight on through. In fact, it is so precise that a lot of skeptics have said, well, there's no way this could have been written in advance. This had to have been written after the events. But the only reason they say that, the only evidence that that might be the case, is their denial of the possibility of predictive prophecy. If you believe that the God of heaven can tell us what the future holds, then there's no reason to doubt that that's exactly what he's done right here. And there's all sorts of reasons to affirm that it's true. This is predictive prophecy fulfilled in incredible detail. We don't have time to look at all of it, as tempting as it is, but we do have time to look at some key passages so that you'll see it and you'll say, wow, that's amazing. That's incredibly precise. Yes, the whole thing's like that. Every single verse. And we could just grind through it in detail. Now, as tedious as that might be for us, again, I want you to imagine what it would be like for them to be going through an incredibly difficult time and to have events unfolding around them and life unraveling around them, and then to look at your sacred scriptures and see it described right there, this event. And then it tells you what's going to happen next. And then it happens in precise detail. And here's the key point: the assurance that that brings of God's presence in your life, of his providential control of history. What must that have been like for them? But we'll look at a few examples. But overview of the chapter, just a few highlights. Verse 2, and this is very fine print. It's not bad up here, but if you look up there, you'll realize why I had such trouble in the first service. I did those slides. I could see them when they were on my laptop. But verse 2 is ongoing Persian rule. For the next 100 years, they would remain under Persian rule. What's so cool, and there's so much good stuff to talk about, I just have to control myself. What we saw in chapter 10 was this great battle, this great spiritual battle behind the scenes where Michael the archangel is engaging with the so-called Prince of Persia, which is a demon ruling over Persia. Well, apparently Michael prevailed because for the next 100 years of Israel's history, Persia would go from being a group of antagonists against Israel, as we see in the book of Esther, to being a nation that protected Israel, a shelter for them. It's incredible what would happen during that period of Persian rule. And that verse predicts the next 3 kings after the one that was king when this was being written. And then the 4th king, Xerxes, and tells a little bit about him. And this is the Ahasuerus of the book of Esther. And it's all predicted right here. And then verses 3 and 4, this is the Greek conquest under Alexander the Great. And it predicts that. It's been predicted before, as you may recall, in the book of Daniel. But here it points out that Alexander the Great would die young, very, very quickly after conquering that empire, and that he would die without an heir. And that, of course, historically, that's exactly right. That's what would happen. And that it would be divided among 4 of his generals, Cassander, Lysimachus, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. And that's exactly what happened. But then the focus goes in this huge section, verses 5 through 30, on 2 of those so-called Hellenistic monarchies, the Seleucids, the descendants of Seleucus, and the Ptolemies, the descendants of Ptolemy. In the passage, they're known as the king of the north, those are the Seleucids, and the king of the south, that's Ptolemaic Egypt. Seleucus and his descendants ruled over what was left of the heart of the Persian Empire to Israel's north, and Ptolemy and his descendants ruled over Egypt and surrounding areas. That's the king of the south. And most of this chapter is given over to a detailed description of what history would finally describe after all the events happened as the 6 Syrian wars. See, Israel had a problem. Seleucus claimed a particular area to Israel's north, and Ptolemy claimed an area to Israel's south, and both groups claimed a section of land that included Israel. Lucky them. So what the 6 Syrian wars were about was a battle between those 2 kingdoms over the piece of land that Israel occupied. So for over 100 years, it would be war back and forth between these 2 sides with Israel caught in the middle. Imagine what that's like. Once those wars ended, it would get worse because the victor, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, would be one of the great persecutors of Israel in all of history. These are the years that Israel has ahead of them. And this chapter tells them all about it in advance. So as the events unfold, they can be assured of the presence of God among them, his providential control of history. And I want to give you just one example of the kind of detail that's provided. And this, I've cut the first service. I'm sorry you missed it. It went way off the rails. I had so much more material. I still do. I feel it happening again. But I cut lots of verses, and now I can't find the ones that I left. But there was a place in verse, let me see, the part about, this is not the way I planned it. I planned it to actually know. Oh, I remember where it was. Verses 7 and 8. Thank you so much. Verses 6 and 7 and 8. Is it 6 also? Yes. Let's look at these. This is just one example of, I didn't write those verses down in my notes. There's the problem. Verse 6 says this. After some years, they shall make an alliance, this king of the north and king of the south, the Seleucids and Ptolemies, and the daughter of the king of the south. Wow, that's very specific. Well, history tells us who that turned out to be. It's Berenice, the daughter of Ptolemy II Philadelphus. Oh, now that one. Shall come to the king of the north, Antiochus II Theos, history tells us that's who that ended up being, to make an agreement. But the prophecy says that she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he as in his arm shall not endure. Well, history showed that as it turns out, that agreement was a failure. It didn't work out at all. Wow, that's remarkable. Keep reading. Next. And from a branch from her roots, Berenice's brother Ptolemy II Euergetes, he is going to arise, and in his place, he shall come against the army of the north. He'll attack the Ptolemies, will attack the Seleucids, and enter the fortress of the king of the north, the Seleucids, and he shall deal with them and shall prevail. So where Berenice in her agreement failed, her brother, Ptolemy III, Euergetes, he would succeed, and he would defeat the Seleucids. Now, reading on. Verse 8, he shall also carry off to Egypt their gods with their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold, which it turns out is exactly what Ptolemy III would do. He would plunder the riches of the Seleucid Empire centered in Antioch and take them back to Egypt. And for some years, he shall refrain from attacking the king of the north. It just goes on like this and on like this and on through the entire chapter with incredible detail. Now, again, imagine what it would be like to be living through this. And as these events unfold and you're hearing this and experiencing that, to be able to look at the Word of God and see, oh, God knew all this. He gave you all the detail, and it's exactly as he predicted. It's absolutely incredible. So just to show you, this is kind of what we're having to skip. Verse after verse after verse after verse of detail like this. If you read it, it will seem dry and impenetrable to you. But imagine how thrilling it would have been to them to see the disaster that they're living through actually predicted in detail by God, and to feel the reassurance that, oh, he's fine, he's got it, he's in control. So this continues until we get, and we're not going to look at the verse, but we get to verse 20 and 21, and things start to change. But before we get there, I just want to remind you of something. You may not have every hard time you'll ever face all written out and described for you in the Bible, but the underlying principle is still true. The underlying principle is still true. Isaiah 46, verses 8 through 10 says this incredible passage. It's true for you, just like it was for them. Remember this and stand firm. Recall it to mind, you transgressors. Remember the former things of old, for I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times, things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose. He speaks that over your life as well, and mine. That there's nothing that can happen, that ever has happened or ever could, that would catch him off guard, that would derail God's purpose and plan for blessing you. Nothing. One of the people I serve out in the marketplace, he owns and operates an engineering company. He's got this quote that he loves, and it comes from Adrian Rogers, and it's this. Has it ever occurred to you that nothing occurs to God? Nothing occurs to God. There's never been a time in all of history, or even eternity past, where God the Father turns to God the Son and says, you know, I just realized something. You know, I've never thought of that before. Wow, that's amazing. I've never thought of that. Or wow, I didn't see that coming. Never. Has it ever occurred to you that nothing occurs to God? Here's another quote, and this is the take home. I heard this from a friend named Fred Lybrand years ago. I've never recovered from it. It's a reminder. No matter what I'm going through, God is God, and he's in it. No matter what you're facing right now, no matter how hard it seems, no matter how unexpected it was, no matter how it may just seem to derail everything in your life, no matter, oh boy, all your plans, forget those. You don't know what's going to happen now. Well, God does. And he's still God. And he's still in it. And if he'd wanted to, he could have written out something like chapter 11 about whatever it is you're going through. He didn't. But it's enough to know that he could. And that he's right in the middle of it all with you. He's in it. He didn't stop being God just because something caught me off guard. He didn't stop being God just because I didn't see that coming. No, God's God. And he's in it. No matter what you're in right now, he's in there with you. So that's the reassurance of much of chapter 11. But then things take a turn. They go from bad to worse. Verse 20 talks about the last king before Antiochus IV Epiphanes. And it's another incredible thing. Verse 20 describes how there's going to be a king who, well, it says here, then shall arise in his place one who shall send an extractor of tribute for the glory of the kingdom. Well, that was Seleucus IV Philopator. And he instituted a policy of heavy taxation because Rome was on the ascendancy right now, and he was having to pay tribute to Rome, and he couldn't afford it, so he instituted heavy taxes on the territory that the Seleucids controlled. Now, one of his officials didn't like that, and so history tells us that official assassinated this particular king. Oh, guess what? Daniel predicted that. But within a few days he shall be broken, neither in anger nor in battle. But then, enter the villain. Verse 21, in his place shall arise a contemptible person, detestable person. This is Antiochus IV. Called himself Epiphanes, manifest of God, the manifestation of God in the world, or so he thought. This is the man that Pastor Kevin talked about a couple of weeks ago when we looked at chapter 9. To whom royal majesty has not been given. Seleucus IV Philopater was Antiochus IV's brother. But when Seleucus was killed, Philopater was killed, Antiochus IV wasn't the heir. One of Seleucus IV's sons would be. Well, one son was in prison in Rome as a hostage. The next son, one of Antiochus IV's nephews, became king, but he got assassinated. And historians believe that Antiochus IV was in on it. That throne was not Antiochus's throne. He took it, perhaps even being involved in the assassination of his own nephew. The verses go on to describe Antiochus's rise to power. He would go on to attack Ptolemaic Egypt. He would enjoy a great victory initially. He would come back, and he began to be a persecutor of Israel at a modest level, nothing compared to what was coming. Later, he would go back again and be rebuffed by Rome. And there is so many cool stories I want to tell you about all this, but we don't have time. But it's that, remember earlier in the book of Daniel, we saw that fourth beast rising up, which was Rome. That fourth beast is rising at this point in history. In one critical moment, Antiochus just gets ordered to leave Egypt and go back home by a Roman senator, former consul. And he has no choice but to obey Rome or risk war with Rome. He goes home, Antiochus IV, but he's enraged, he's humiliated, he's embarrassed, and he takes it out on Israel. It had been his purpose for a while to destroy Judaism and to turn Judah, as they called it at the time, into a place of pagan worship, into a place where the gods of Greece were worshiped. And so he went back and he went into the temple and he set up a statue likely of Zeus in the Holy of Holies, and he sacrificed a pig on the altar, and a rebellion broke out, the Maccabean revolt. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but this individual is one of the great villains in the history of Israel. But he's a foreshadowing of a still greater villain we'll talk about in a moment. But verse 30 and 31 talks about this. For ships of Kittim, I won't explain why, but that means Roman ships, shall come against him, Antiochus, and he shall be afraid and withdraw. And this is while he was laying siege to Alexandria, Egypt. This is the event where Rome ordered him out. And he shall turn back and be enraged and take action against the holy covenant. He's back on his way to Antioch. He unleashes his persecution of Israel and his determination to destroy Judaism. He shall turn back and pay attention to those who forsake the holy covenant. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress. This was prophesied here in Daniel 11. It happened. And shall take away the regular burnt offering. They outlawed the regular burnt offering, along with circumcision and other things. And they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. Reference to this statue, presumably of Zeus, in the Holy of Holies. And at this point, again, the Maccabean revolt breaks out. The high priest at the time, Mattathias, refuses to comply. He kills a Seleucid official, and then his son Judas takes up the cause, and the Maccabean revolt has begun. Look at verses 32 through 35, and I think I've got this on the screen. He shall seduce with flattery, Antiochus, those who violate the covenant. But the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. And the wise among the people shall make many understand. Though for some days they shall stumble by sword and flame, by captivity and plunder. When they stumble, they shall receive a little help. And many shall join themselves to them with flattery. Here the word means intrigue. And some of the wise shall stumble so that they may be refined, purified, and made white until the time of the end, and it awaits the appointed time. Okay, let's unpack a few things there. First of all, the notion of flattery. He shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant. If we'd gone back and looked more closely at how he rose to power, we'll see that flattery was there too. What he did was really simple, and we see it all the time. It's a matter of talking people out of their convictions by agreeing to say nice things to them and about them and mean nasty things if they don't violate their convictions. It's all those times the world tells you how reasonable you are and how admirable you are for agreeing with the world and not standing up for your Christian convictions. It's all the times where you're told how much better you are than those bigoted Christians who hold these narrow views and so forth, and how broad-minded you are, and all this. This is flattery. And it's the same thing that Antiochus Epiphanes did. He flattered a lot of the religious leaders of Israel, and they went with it. So here's the warning. The enemy's most effective weapon, at least the one Antiochus enjoyed, and the enemy today uses it a lot, is flattery. Don't fall for it. I mean, flattery like this is a picture of one of the coaches of the other team walking out on the field, telling you how wonderful you are as he escorts you off the field to the sidelines and into the stands, and now you're useless. Yes, but didn't he say nice things? He was so complimentary. Yeah, and you're out of the game. You're not a threat anymore. This is what Antiochus did. But there's more to this passage, because you see in this passage that not everyone fell for it. Back in verse 32, but the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. And the wise among the people shall make many understand. Yes, there are some who bite on the flattery and they become useless as a result, but there are others. There are others who know the truth. The people who know their God stand firm and take action. And as you see in the passage, they pay a price for it. Though for some days they shall stumble by sword and flame, by captivity and plunder. When they stumble, they shall receive a little help, and many shall join themselves by flattery. But even that suffering has a purpose. Verse 35, and some of the wise shall stumble so that they may be refined and purified and made white. So the question is, when evil gets the upper hand, what kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be somebody that succumbs to flattery, and as a result you just walk off the field and you're taken out of the game? Is that what you want? Of course not. Or do you want to be like these people, the people who know their God and who stand firm and who take action and who speak? And notice, and the wise among them, the people shall make many understand. You help others who might be tempted to succumb to the flattery understand the biblical, godly point of view. People who know their God shall stand firm and take action. The wise among the people shall make many understand. Verse 35 ends. Now we transition to, I'm out of time, but coming up soon. But notice the end of verse 35. Until the time of the end, for it still awaits the appointed time. Those interesting words mark a transition. Because up to this point, verses 2 through 35, you can see very specific historical fulfillment for the very specific prophecies. It's absolutely amazing. But something changes in verse 36. Suddenly it doesn't match up so well anymore. I mean, hardly at all. this pattern of clear historical fulfillment of clear prophecies, it breaks at this point. And in verses 36 through 45, it's like Daniel's talking about someone else now. Now, if you try to make it fit Antiochus Epiphanes, then, well, you're stuck with trying to explain a conquest of certain empires in the territory that never happened, and other details that just don't match his career. Who are we talking about here? Well, just a final slide on this. Daniel 9, 36 through 45. Who are we talking about here? Is it Antiochus or is it the Antichrist? Well, as I've said, the verses don't align well with historical events, not at all. But they will align wonderfully with events that haven't occurred yet. And as you can see also on the screen, if your eyes are better, you've got a better screen than I do. Antiochus was Greek. And by the way, in chapter 8, it says there's going to be a little horn that arises from Greece, but the earlier chapters, like 7, say that the real ultimate little horn that arises and becomes the Antichrist doesn't arise from Greece. It arises from Rome. Jesus taught in Matthew 25, verses 15 and following, that the abomination of desolations, we just saw a reference to that, when Antiochus Epiphanes put the statue of Zeus in the Holy of Holies. Jesus taught that the real fulfillment of the abomination of desolations was still future. New Testament books look ahead to the Antichrist. They don't look back to Antiochus. And Daniel 10 through 12 is a unit. It's all one thing. And the reality is that the final battle that's described in chapter 12 doesn't even come close to anything that happened in the ancient world, because one of the things it talks about is the resurrection of the dead. It talks about the end of days. Verses 36 through 45 are not about Antiochus Epiphanes. It's sort of a cross dissolve, if you know that word from film, that takes place from this foreshadowing of the Antichrist, Antiochus Epiphanes, to the real Antichrist who will come one day. And if we had time, we could go through what it says about that character as a prelude to more detail, even in chapter 12. The lesson, though, for us in that section, which we've not had time to look at in any detail, is this. There's terrible suffering ahead for the people of God. The suffering is not over. And the little things that happen in our lives that are hard and difficult and annoying, it's good to be reminded of what's happening to our Nigerian brothers and sisters, to be reminded about what can happen and what life can be like. And the question in closing is this: are you prepared? Are you prepared? The first piece of advice I give is simply this: study God's plan. You know, I've got Deuteronomy 29:29 up there on the screen. What's Deuteronomy doing up there? It's a simple verse that says this: the hidden things belong to God, but the revealed things belong to us and to our children. We are skimming along the surface of just a few chapters of prophetic revelation in the Bible. And yet God took real pains to give us a lot of real information about things to come. And the revealed things belong to us. Studying God's plan can anchor you and prepare you, just as it would have prepared them and did prepare them back in the 5th century and following in Daniel 11. But then once you've got that anchoring, next, several more ideas here just quickly in closing. Be hopeful and courageous. That's what this whole book, our study of Daniel is called that. It's courageous hope. Because knowing these things about what the God of heaven is up to in the world can give you hope as you watch things unfold. And it can give you courage as God calls you to step up and step in and to be part of it. That's why we call this whole series Courageous Hope, because that's the ultimate response. But then also, along the way, don't fall for flattery. Because the enemy wants to incapacitate you. The enemy wants you to be spiritually irrelevant. The enemy wants you to go along to get along and just, in so doing, just walk off the field of play and become an irrelevancy. Don't let that happen. Don't fall for the flattery. Next, stand firm, take action. And that looks like a lot of different things in a lot of different situations. But in whatever situation you're in, ask yourself, what does it look like to stand up for God in this moment? To speak into this moment with biblically based wisdom and with courage and a readiness to face the consequences, knowing that this is what it looks like to be a warrior for Jesus at this time, in this moment. And then finally, help many others understand. I put the word many in there because the text does. Many shall understand, because those who are wise will pass along that wisdom. And that's what, that's what we're doing right now. That's what I do all day, every day. I'm doing it with business owners and CEOs out in the marketplace. It's helping them see the challenges they face from a biblical point of view, to respond in a godly way, to lead with a Christian courage, to do things that build the kingdom of God. And no matter what God has called you to do, you've got that assignment too. It's to be that source of courage and hope and wisdom and change wherever God has put you. And of course, it starts with the challenge you're facing, with the crisis in your life or a loved one's life. And being assured that God is in it with you. And you don't have to give up on him, because he sure hasn't given up on you. So let me pray for you right now as we step out of this passage. Give it more time, dig in, study this stuff. It's amazing. But let me pray for you. Father, there are so many things that walk through the door today with us, things that are on our hearts and on our minds and burdening our shoulders. Things that might have surprised us, things that might have just thrown us for a loop completely, things that we don't know what to do. Or we think we do, but boy, it's big. And Lord, none of that caught you by surprise. You got there first. You were already there waiting for us in that moment of crisis, with all of your power and all of your love and all of your reassurance, because you are God and you are in it. And Father, I pray that as we go out of here today, that we'd go out with lighter hearts and unburdened shoulders, knowing that the God of the universe is on the case, but also with a renewed resolve to be useful to you and a blessing to others, because we, like these people described here in Daniel 11, stand firm and take action. Give us the courage, Lord. In Christ's name we pray, amen.